Hello, I am Katie Joya. I work with West Coast Seeds. I am a rep for the retailers in the interior of BC. Buckerfield is one of them, and here in Salmon. I take care of the seed racks. I keep them full, especially in the spring when everybody's wanting their seeds. Starting roughly in December is when everybody starts getting their seeds started or bought and planting their gardens. So that's what I do. I work with Buckerfields and Nico's and Home Hardwares all over the interior. I'm on the road constantly filling these racks. So today I'm going to talk to you about growing food indoors and in containers. This is a little bit about West Coast Seeds. It's a really good company. They've been around for over 30 years. They're from the BC coast in Delta. Very knowledgeable people. The website is super resourceful for growing different kinds of plants, gardening, container gardening, indoor gardening, everything. So yeah, that's just a little bit about West Coast Seeds if you're not familiar. Why would you want to do indoor gardening or grow food indoors? One big reason is you can grow longer. You have a controlled climate inside, so you have controlled temperature. You can control the humidity easier than you can outside. You don't necessarily have downpours of rain and weather changes, so there are certain things that you can grow all year long inside, as long as you have the right growing conditions, which we'll talk about in a bit. Growing indoors and in containers is more cost effective than getting your produce at the grocery store. If you grow your own food, whether it's by seeds or if you just buy the transplants at the garden center, it's still more cost effective than getting your produce at the grocery store. If you live in the city or in a small space, I happen to live in a little teeny tiny apartment up in Tappan, and I just have a little patio, so I don't have land to grow anything in, but I have a few things growing. I've got herbs and tomatoes, so if you have the right kind of conditions, you can grow what you want to grow. And of course, it's a perfect introduction to growing outside if you do want to get started in gardening and you've never gardened before. Growing things indoors can help you get started in that area. So the things that we'll go over to get to the basics of growing indoors and in containers, basically choosing the location, whether that's in a window, whether that's your patio, or even it's just a countertop in your kitchen. When I first was putting together this talk, I thought that I would do an indoor section and then I would do containers, but really it's all the same. The plants are going to need the same requirements whether they're growing inside or whether they're growing outside. So the principles are the same either way, so just think about what your particular situation is and where you can grow these plants the best. So it might be a windowsill, or it might be outside if you do have that space. So, and also choosing the system of growing, which can be either using the sun or using artificial lights or using both. If you have the means to have artificial lights in your home, it definitely will help with indoor gardening, but if you don't, there's still things that you can grow. And choosing which plants. So if there's certain plants that you want to grow, certain foods that you want to grow, of course they're gonna have their own requirements. So this will help you determine if you can grow them and how to grow them. So successful gardening, whether it's indoors or in containers or in the ground, it's just about taking care of the plant's needs. So the light that they need, the water, the nutrition. So whether that's coming from your garden outside, or it's coming on your kitchen counter with your supplemental lighting, either way, the plants need what they need, and if they don't get what they need, they're not going to do very well. But everybody can grow food indoors. Everybody can grow their own food. There is a limit, of course, but it just depends on what your situation is. So there are things that you can grow very easily, or it can be as challenging as you want it to be. If you like a challenge and you want to grow a pumpkin in a container on your patio, you probably can do it. It might be hard to do, but so it depends on how easy or how challenging you want it to be. And of course, what works best for you, your time that you have available, the energy that you want to put into it, and your budget. The biggest benefit to growing indoors, again, is that you can control the environment. You can control how much light or humidity or water that your plants get. So you want to pick the right area indoors. If you are lucky enough to have a south-facing window where you get a lot of light, that's always a good place. As long as it's not obstructed by trees, or if you have a screened-in window, you probably want to have some supplemental lighting just to help the plants. And again, think about temperature and humidity. If you have a windowsill, is that really the right place? There might be a draft that's going to dry your plants out faster. There might be a heater nearby that's going to dry them out. So it's kind of a puzzle where you want to figure out how you want to do things. So whether you decide to use seeds or use transplants from the garden center is another decision. Now, the benefit of seeds is they're available all year. You can buy them all in the spring and store them, or a lot of times they're just sold year-round in the store. So you can have a constant flow of food, or a constant growing of food in your kitchen, or in your windowsill, or on your patio. So there's a lot more variety available with seeds. So a lot of things like arugula, and wide variety of lettuce, wide variety of kales. Those kinds of things aren't always available as transplants in garden centers. There's the standard things that you can get, but a lot of the seeds, especially that West Coast Seeds carries, are cresses and chicories and things like that you're not going to find in garden centers. Sprouts and microgreens, those are from seed. You can buy microgreens as produce in the grocery, of course, in sprouts, but you can easily start those in your kitchen, and again, buy them year-round. So the benefit of the transplants is that they are less work, because you don't have to start the seed. If you were, say, starting tomatoes or peppers, it would be easier to buy the plant from the garden center, but it would be still more cost-effective with seeds. But again, the transplants are still going to save you money in the long run anyway. So whatever works better for you. So with container gardening, you can use a lot of different containers. We think of pots, of course. Sometimes we think of clay pots or plastic pots. Especially with growing indoors, you can grow in anything, really, as long as it holds your soil and it has good drainage. So you can use recycled plastic bottles, you can use recycled food containers, takeout containers, that kind of thing. well for microgreens. In the seed sprouting, you want to do in jars. There are like these contraptions that you can get to grow sprouts and stuff, but all you really need is a jar, the mason jar, and some kind of a screen lid that allows for airflow. And of course, there's the option of hydroponic gardening, which is a lot more advanced. I won't get into that. That would be a whole other talk. So there's all kinds of setups that you could get if you wanted to invest in that. By all means, look into it. They come with lights, they come with all the nutrition, but you do have to know what you're looking at with hydroponics. So the absolute most important part of growing food is the light. Everything that we eat pretty much requires full sun. So if you're limited on light, it's okay. You would need supplemental light, but the lighting is super important. When plants don't get adequate light, they don't grow as well, they're weaker, they're yellow, they don't produce many flowers, they don't produce much fruit if that's what you're after, fruit. So it just isn't. If you don't have light, you need to think more about supplemental lighting. And fruits and roots, so carrots and beets and radishes, they're very light demanding. Things like just leafy green things, lettuces, even radishes that are grown for their leaves, they are less light demanding, but if you're wanting fruit, it's best to just stick with outside full sun. And of course, there's these really nice kits that come with a tray to grow things in, and then the lights that are adjustable, super easy. You don't have to think about it. You can see there's lettuce growing there. These are really good for microgreens as well. The thing about supplemental lighting is getting the right kind of light bulb. You don't want just any light bulb, any fluorescent light. There's special plant bulbs that work best. So Buckerfield carries some. You can get the screw-in kinds at the hardware store, but you definitely have to look for the plant bulbs because they have a different spectrum of light that the plants need. And of course, the more light, the better. 2 bulbs is better than 1. 4 bulbs is better than 2. So the more light that you can give the plants, the better off it'll be, and the happier the plants will be. So now, the fun part is finding out what you can grow indoors. Of course, all of this could be grown outdoors as well, but this is quite a good list of things that can be grown indoors. But as you can see, a lot of it is just leafy green stuff. There's not anything that fruits or flowers on this list, or roots even. So carrots and beets aren't ideal, but there are scallions. So scallions, the little green onions, those can be grown indoors. So there's quite a bit, and you can have a good, like I was saying with starting the seeds, you can have a rotating harvest. So you can constantly start new lettuce while you're harvesting your other lettuce, and then start new and keep harvesting. So the very easiest thing to grow indoors is the sprouting seeds. So like the sprouts you get at the grocery store, the mung bean sprouts, you can do that at home, and you can do it. West Coast Seeds has a ton of different kinds of sprouts that you can grow. The alfalfa and the mung beans are the easiest to get started with. That's why I had them in bold. But there's a whole variety of stuff with different flavors and different sizes and different nutrition. And again, it's good to have 2 jars. So this is one of the jars that West Coast Seeds sells at some of the retailers, and it has a lid that has air holes in it. And so you empty your seeds into the jar and you rinse them several times a day until they start to sprout. And once they've sprouted and they form their first set of leaves, they're ready. They don't need light. You can keep them in the fridge. They're super easy. So the next easiest thing to grow inside would be microgreens. So these do require some soil, some kind of potting soil, and some kind of a container. So it could be like that lighting system I showed earlier, or it could be a takeout container with holes poked in the bottom and one of the screw-in light bulbs on your kitchen counter. So it could be as simple as that. They do need some light, so they like to germinate in the dark for a couple days and get some height on them. So plants will stretch out when they don't get enough light. So you kind of want that with microgreens. And then once they form their first leaves, you want to give them really good light so they green up and the plants develop the flavor and the nutrition, and then you can harvest them. They're good with salads and garnishes and put in soups, and they're super flavorful. So the broccoli ones, the radishes, they're very flavorful. So as I was saying earlier, pretty much anything can be grown in a container. It just depends on the amount of work you want to put into it and what your needs are. Like if you wanted one container with a giant pumpkin, you can do that, but if you're looking to get the most food, it's best to read the tags, understand what you're getting yourself into with the size of the plant and how much space it needs. So pot size is very important, especially for fruiting plants and the root vegetables like carrots and beets. The bigger the pot, obviously the more you can put in there. So if you wanted to grow onions or carrots, having a big pot will allow you to grow more plants. But if you wanted to grow a tomato, the bigger pot is going to allow that tomato plant, that one plant, to grow really big and strong and produce tons of flowers and lots of fruit. So think about the pot size that you can fit in your home or on your patio, and pay attention to plant tags or the seed packets and see what those plants really need. With tomatoes, it's good to look for bush versus instead of the vine. If you want the vine, you can do it, but the bush is easier. So the bushes have a stopping point when they grow. They're called determinate, that's the technical term. But the vining ones will grow and grow and grow forever and get really big and grow until basically they get killed in the winter. So it's more ideal to look for the bush types. And you can get like cherry tomatoes, main season tomatoes, all of those can be bush types. Just make sure to read the labels. Drainage, of course, is very important. So make sure if you are recycling containers using old buckets, just make sure that you drill holes in the bottom, or those really nice whiskey barrels that, really cute things. Just make sure that they have drainage holes. It's really important. And now the terracotta pots, they look nice as well. I like them a lot, but they do get really heavy when they're full of soil. And if you want a big terracotta pot where you can grow a good amount of food in it, it's going to be really heavy, and it's also going to dry out faster. Those are porous pots, so that means they can leach out water, and they dry out way faster. And when it's hot in the hot summer, it just isn't ideal. The plastic will work better in that kind of situation. You'll have to water a bit less with the plastic. But you can use any kind of plastic. You don't have to go buy the big 8-gallon or 10-gallon pots. pots, if you have things around that you can recycle, by all means, just make sure it's food safe. You don't want to use old chemical containers or anything. Winter protection, that's kind of a bit of an advanced step there. If you wanted to have some lettuces growing into the fall and into the early winter, you can cover them with frost cloth or plastic, or you can have a cold frame if you still wished and you had room on your patio. You can do those kinds of things, but that's a bit more advanced, but it's an option. So these are just some of the containers that Buckerfield has. I just really like the great big pots. They're just super appropriate for growing food. They might not be the prettiest, but they work really well, and that's what I like. And then these trays that go underneath so that you don't lose a lot of water. You hold the water. The water is super important. Again, super important. Especially when it's hot, like you might end up watering twice a day, maybe more. This was a really hot summer and we were constantly watering and constantly watching our plants wilt, but they will, they will come back from that. Tomatoes especially will come back from wilting, but it just, hopefully you have access to a hose. Not everybody does, but just keep that in mind. If you're planning to have this great big garden on your patio, you might be going back and forth with your watering can to the kitchen, to the patio quite a bit to keep those things watered. So it's just something to keep in mind. And the best way to tell if they do need water is to just kind of stick your finger in to your first knuckle and just see how dry that is. If it's dry, go ahead and water until the water comes out the bottom of the pot. Now, as far as choosing a soil or a fertilizer, so this might feel like a daunting task, but it's actually very easy. The packaging does the hard work for you. You don't have to be an expert in soils or fertilizers and nitrogen and phosphorus and understand the numbers. Just read the packaging. It'll tell you what it's used for. There's tomato food, or there's fertilizers for developing roots. So you might want to use that on your carrots or onions. So just read the labels and choose it that way. It's the easiest and it takes the guesswork out. Same with the soil. Most of the potting soils they're perfectly fine, and there's great options out there. Some have fertilizer in them to get you started. Some of them hold moisture better than others, so just read the packaging. If you like what you see, try that out until you get a feel for this container gardening thing, and then you can go from there. And Buckerfield's they have everything you need for growing indoors. They carry all the sprouts, all the microgreens. They have all the pots, trays, lights, everything. So if you wanted to just go ahead and get started, Buckerfield's has it. West Coast Seeds has everything as well. These are just some pictures of some of the things that Buckerfield's has. So Miracle Grow, perfectly great. It's a great fertilizer. I use Miracle Grow. It doesn't have to be a fancy thing. It works really well. And then there's the Terracotta products on the right side there. They work well. They work good as well. They are time released. So the ones on the right are time released little capsules, and you can put those in the soil or on top of the soil, and when you water, it fertilizes over like 3 or 6 months. So that's a really good option. Choosing water soluble or liquid fertilizers is also good to add to that. So if you are doing the time released, it's a good idea to occasionally go ahead and do some of the liquid or the water soluble fertilizer every few weeks, just to give the plant a boost. And that's the the basics. I know I went fast, but I wanted to get through in case there were some questions. It's a lot of information that we could talk about forever. I have a lot of really awesome resources here. West Coast Seeds Growing Guide is excellent. There's tons of information about all the plants and different kinds of gardening in there. There's a growing chart to show you what kind of things you might be planting right now or in the coming spring. There's a booklet on how to do microgreens and sprouts. And then the companion planting guide, that's more for gardening and pairing different flowers with different vegetables and why you might want to pair them together, but that's there as well too. So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer.
Oops. Thank you so much, Katie.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.